We have it's kind of a special segment for this week, but it was meant to be on last week, although we just didn't have time. As it turned out, we had to do a kind of an abridged one. But they're not coming in new laws now, but there are new law considerations that World Rugby have put forward.
Right.
They're basically a few little changes that are to be discussed. I think there's a meeting that's happening in. There
was a meeting that happened,
on
June 26th. We haven't heard the
findings
of it, and I don't know that anything has been
set in stone.
Yeah. But the June 26th meeting is where it was making news, and no news has emerged from it as of yet.
Yeah.
But there was a meeting in Marcoussis in France. And there were sort of delegates and all sorts of official heads at it, and they were going over a load of data and going over new rules and laws that they were going to bring in.
Yeah.
I'm just going to read here. Headline game. This is just taken from an article done by, I think, Ultimate Rugby. It says headline game analysis data confirmed ball and play time in rugby has increased by up to 50% since 1987.
Right.
There are greater increases in the Northern Hemisphere competitions. The number of tackles per game has increased by 252% over the same time period.
Yeah.
Scrums have decreased by 56%. The tackle accounts for 50% of all injuries and 76% of all concussions. And 72% of concussions in the tackle are occurring to the tackler.
Yeah.
The group then considered evidence-based ways to reduce injuries in the tackles, resulting in a number of recommendations to consider within the law amendment process.
Right.
And so here are the sort of headline, I think there's 6 proposals, and we'll just read them out and then go through them.
Sure.
So the first is the much discussed 50-22 kick proposal, which, the ruling would be that if you kick the ball from... I think it's
inside your own half.
Inside your own half.
To bounce and go out in the opposing 22, which is a rule that does exist in rugby league.
Yes.
It means that you then get the put into the subsequent line out.
But if you kick it from your opposition half and it goes into touch, it's still the opposition line out. And if you kick it from your own half and it goes into touch but not in the opposition 22, it's still the opponent line out. And it is, as you say, a rule in rugby league. The idea, I suppose, is to get defensive lines to respect the weapon that a kick could be. Have to put more players in the back
punishing the bad habits of Welsh wingers.
Ooh, there you go.
Just a little bit of ball watching that leads to you creeping up into the line. It's punishing it. Is the idea of it. And I'm in two minds with it. I don't hate it as a proposal at all.
I don't hate it.
It's not unprecedented to change these laws or anything. Obviously, like the 22, you kicking out of from your own 22 from a free kick net, that used to be premise. A lot of
there's all kinds of things that have drastically changed the game, the way the game is played. This would be one, no question. This would drastically change the dynamics at play when a team has the ball in their own half. But perhaps not for the worse.
A lot of old players from the amateur era are bemoaning just some of how defensive systems work now, where there's less Serge Blanco one-on-one, that just isn't a picture. It's not 15 going against 15 and who's going to get the better of that exchange. Serge Blanco is now being guided into the channel where we want him, where our flanker is there covering it.
Matt Todd has ripped the ball from him.
So that the game has changed in that regard. So to create a bit more space by having wingers have to be a bit more disciplined if that kick is on. It also means that that a probing attacking kick for territory, which is something that it's definitely diminished. It does still happen sometimes.
The Ronan
O'Gara special, that model of out half where you're always looking for that probing little kick and where the wingers are. It's kind of dwindled a bit in the game, and some defensive systems have come up, like Ireland with one sweeper in the backfield and one winger dropping back to help cover with 13 men up in the line. Makes a very intimidating wall that's very, very tough and physical to break down. And if the talk is like all those stats you were talking about, the increased number in tackles, the increased number of time in ball and play, and you're thinking like a team like Ireland, as to carry on that example, who are just going to go ruck 40 phases, making you make all those tackles. It's worthy of consideration.
So perhaps even without the law changes, the game has pivoted from where it was to where it is, just with more and more intricate coaching, and more sort of athletic players, that they've managed to manufacture a look to the game that is actually quite different from what it was, even with the same laws around this sort of open play. This would be a very different law, but it might recreate a more old school look.
Potentially, and that's certainly what I read into it in terms of,
and just it's decreasing the number of tackles.
That's true.
It's an idea to do that, and I think from a game perspective, it's going to create all kinds of intrigue, because that skill is joyous when it's done well. It's a great
you better
part of the
believe
game.
that would mean next season, if that comes in next season in Super Rugby, you're going to see a Brumbies team with a 10 who's going to be kicking from his own half all day long. Going to be looking for that
the
win.
Brumbies could be, if they could find a 10, like I don't know if Leia Lafano has it in them to do that, the Raj thing, but if they could find a 10 who could do that, they would become unstoppable, because that's all their game was about, is creating those attacking lineouts.
This is it, so it's a cool, I think that's a potentially cool idea. I wouldn't mind seeing it on a trial basis in one competition, to just to see how it works dynamically and how teams adjust to it. But that's one I don't have a real problem with. There are the other ones here, the reduction in the number of permitted substitutions, which is one that I do have a problem with.
Well, I just haven't heard an explanation for why it would be a good thing.
Well, all I can reason is a kind of an argument that I've heard put forward, which I kind of do buy as well, is that the fact that they're now you're allowed to use all your 8 subs means that the focus has shifted. Like in the amateur days, there used to even be subs, then subs were allowed subsequently just for injury, and then finally tactical subs. But now you're having a position where it's like it's a little tidbit, it's a little soundbite you hear in interviews, like it's not a 15-man game, it's a 23-man game. And the fact of it being a 23-man game, coupled with all of those stats you're saying, ball in play much longer, more tackles, more physical players, heavier players, it just means that at the 60-minute mark, when there are tired bodies everywhere and a bit of fatigued decision making going on the pitch, there are fresh monsters coming on to that pitch, and more collisions that are intense. So that's I would imagine the rationale, but I do disagree with it, because I think the presence of all of those substitutions, the ability to bring them on and off, is what helps with those injury profiles anyway. So
otherwise you're going to have guys force themselves to stay on, and that's obviously a bad thing.
People feel like their knee or tendon or something is going, but they're going to have to hobble on and go a bit longer.
And even so, guys will just have to play through fatigue, and fatigue, like you can't. Like, this is the problem with statifying everything, is that you can't necessarily test fatigue, so it's a data point that's missing from all of this. But I'd say fatigue massively contributes to concussion and the like.
Well, considering you're talking about the 72% of concussions coming from the tackled player. If you're tackling it's
the tackler. It's the coming
from a tackler. That's what I mean.
He's getting the concussion.
And it's like, your tackle technique gets sloppy if it's your 23rd tackle in a 60-minute period. Like, you're going to go in there a bit more floundering and maybe catch a knee.
That's exactly right. And that's a data point that's missing from that. That's an element that. That's why I would hope that there were smart heads in that room lobbying against that proposal for that exact reason.
I would hope that point was made anyway, because it does feel, like the reason that I illustrated is just apropos of nothing. Like you're saying rightly that I haven't heard what the rationale is, but that's what I'm assuming it is. And I think it's moot, because I think there are more counterpoints. Most namely, that is just you want to be able to spot players that need to be rotated out, and plus things like what the front row have to do now, with the amount of work that the pack do for the first 60 minutes and the general fitness of them. You need to be replacing props at 60 minutes, because otherwise things like scrums become dangerous as well, because they're fatigued props trying to hold the weight of like 16 massive men in there, and it's like that's also a recipe for disaster potentially. I disagree with that one more so than the 50-22. That's one that I would have a problem with, is they augmented that. The next one there, you can read it out.
Well, I'm just trying to figure it out here. In fact, the off feet at the ruck, players must leave the ball, which I'm pretty sure was already the law. So they say creates a greater contest at the ruck to speed up ball availability. Looking at these other points, I think it's more trying to find laws around these points, so they're more headlines than anything else. But I think the idea is that an offensive player who doesn't necessarily dive over the top but loses his feet at the ruck in some way. You often see guys, but I feel like this is illegal already.
It feels like it is, but they get away with it. Like I've seen it happen before, where like a guy's off his feet at the a guy's going for the ball, say on the defensive breakdown, loses his foot, like takes a knee. The ref says hands off, but as he's saying like hands, your man does actually rip the ball, so then brings it back to his side even though he said hands off. And then another player in the ruck from the offensive side sees that as an affront, gets in there, is off his feet, and then throws it back on his side, and the ref kind of goes, play on. Because it's like, well, that's a fair enough result, even though both of them were actually illegal.
I get that as common sense refereeing. I think I don't have too much of a problem with that. What I think this is addressing is, guys, it's illegal to dive off your feet, but it's not illegal to lose your footing in a ruck. If you're clearing out a guy and you clear him out and then you lose your footing, that's genuine rucking. I think what they're saying is that guy needs to sort of leave the ruck to create a greater contest. That you can't then just lie in a position where you're going to prevent any counter rucking. Which how will that affect the general closing out of games tactic that teams adopt, that we saw the Crusaders doing even last week? Probably negatively. I would hope so.
Yeah, well, it's like one that Nigel Owens can't abide, and he'll look for any excuse to ping you. If you're setting up pods of 4 forwards to go and flop into a ruck that's uncontestable, he'll pin you even if he doesn't see anything. He just hates the tactic. He does, he's like, no, pass the ball.
The fourth headline here is just delaying the movement of the ruck defensive line. So in the defensive line at the ruck, finding a law change they haven't specified here that reduces the line speed of the defence, essentially. So right now, guys are flying up. But I was
enforcing the current offside law would actually do that job.
100%.
Like they're just ignoring it for the last season. So there doesn't really need to be a law change. Just be a bit more stringent on the defensive line. That's something that I feel like the linesman should be calling. That should be the linesman's purview, so that the ref can focus on the ruck and not be pulled and dizzy by that, because the refs often are like, you do see like some awful stuff get overlooked in the ruck while the ref's doing this, and you're just going like this,
and then vice versa. The ref turns around to look at the ruck and
someone comes shooting up,
flying out,
and he's not called because the linesman rarely gets in the rear about an offside or just a slight encroachment unless it's blatant.
What's definitely true is, as per the definition of offside in the laws at the moment, if you watch most professional rugby games over the last year, both defences have been routinely offside because they're breaking a little early. They're not actually at the hindmost foot,
especially with the new law being that the scrum half, it's not out when it used to be, if your hand is on it, then the offside line is gone, and they can.
But that's not the law anymore.
It's not the law. He has to remove it from the ruck, and they're definitely breaking early from that point. 100%. Exactly. So this is why you're coming up with a new way of phrasing it or coming up with a new law seems.
Well, it's fine if they can give a directive to referees to just enforce that offside line stringently. That would be great, and hopefully that's what's being discussed here, because it's. I'm glad at least that they're
recognising
addressing
the problem with it. Because it has shut down. It's created a lot of sloppy games, particularly in the wet. When games have gone to that place, it's been pretty hideous sometimes to watch, because the offense just has no way of shutting down that aggressive line speed that is coming from an illegal place. From the current laws that we do have, you're just looking at it going like, well, they're offside, but it's become a moot point.
It has, you don't get to yell offside anymore because everyone's always offside, so forget about it.
It's all just free for all.
And then the fifth and sixth are pretty straightforward. The fifth one is lower the tackle height again. I think they're trying to get this nipple thing going on that we've seen over the last little while.
I still think it's kind of arbitrary and nonsense, but
well, listen, if they want to completely remove everything shoulders up, I understand, but you do have to have the ball playing, ball trapping factor in defences. It's like one of the worst arguments that I've seen is that lowering the tackle height to hip down is going to improve the game because it creates more offloads. That's not going to improve the game. It's going to remove the dynamic at play in terms of stopping teams from offloading it.
Yes.
That's a real dynamic, and there's already great sides that offload, and I would encourage any side that wants to win things to bring an offloading element to their game. But there's also a way to stop it.
Yes.
And that's crucial
like the
to
choke
have that
tackle.
in rugby.
Great stuff. Beautiful bit of tactics. That's all the double tackle where it's one low, one high. Which is probably something that they're looking at to try and discourage for more reasons than one as far as injury. But it's great like little dynamic. Like how else are you going to stop Leone Nakarawa? Not to say that you're not going to stop him anyway. But you need to have some kind of way
to have a fair
challenge
chance.
him. But also challenge him, because as soon as he's challenged, that's when he pulls off the most excellent of offloads.
Indeed.
So it's all good to have a little bit of height in it. I understand where they're coming from. I just find like
it's also like they're like, I agree with the new high tackle laws they put out. I'm glad that they finally brought some clarity to that. I think it's great. I like the idea of mitigating and aggravating factors as a concept.
I certainly just know where we stand with that issue now much more than I did. I
think they have it more or less right, and I think what they're struggling with is that they want to every year be sort of implementing a broad plan on concussion. But as their own data points out, it's actually it's diminishing every year, the idea that it's the tackled player getting the concussion. In fact, more often than not, it's the tackler, and they're going to have to come up with ways to address that as well. And I tell you, the closer you bring the head down to the opponent's knees, those stats aren't going to improve.
No, there's always those guys who run with the knees up style. They'll knock you clean out if you catch a knee to the face.
Masvidal you to
yes, indeed. Like it's crazy. That's kind of one that like they need to kind of look where the focus is. It's the same. It's the same with some of their dangerous tackle rules, where they're like things like the Danny Cipriani red card earlier on, which ultimately didn't set a precedent. In fact, it made them seem to review things and rein it back in because it was so silly. But it's like, surely
it quietly destroyed Gloucester's season.
It did, but then no one really cared. Apart from Daragh
and
Gloucester fans. I know. But Munster were happy enough about it. But that being so as ridiculous as it was also like to point out that like not only is that tackle like, yes, it's high and its shoulder does make contact with the head, but you need to.
It wasn't a tackle.
It wasn't a tackle. It was a classic number 10 just giving a little. And then ignoring the tackle. But it's also like, if you're really going to rule on dangerous tackles, you need to be looking at things like force. Where is the force coming from? Is the ball carrier bringing all the force, and the tackled player or tackling player is just soaking it? And if so, if he goes a bit high or if the shoulder connects with the head, that's not really a red card offence. Maybe he's just in a scrambling, compromised position because the ball carrier is bringing. Isn't it like? Those kinds of rationales need to be applied.
Dangerously probably is something that they could put a bit more focus on, but I think the new laws do that
a little bit more. But it's just it needs to always be zeroed back down to like, is this dangerous? Where's the danger coming from in this scenario, rather than shoulder to the head is red. Like it's not as clear cut as that, because the Cipriani example, that's a shoulder to the head, that's so far from a red card. And then later in that game, a tackle, like literally a few minutes later, a tackle much worse that was much more dangerous, but although it didn't quite get to the head, that was a yellow card for that arbitrary reason. So it's like with this kind of law as well, the tackle height, lowering the tackle height to below the nipple is kind of just an oddly specific thing that's going to have a load of video ref stuff of guys just looking at it for 5 minutes going like, is it the nipple? I can't actually see his nipple through the shirt. So
and then they're going to have to design these shirts with
a little thing on it.
It's going to be a complete mess.
So I don't like the arbitrary pointing of a thing like that, when I really would rather trust the refs to apply the laws as they are now, with just a few guidelines on where's the danger element,
and figure out creative ways, as they're doing, to reduce the number of tackles in a game. Then finally they're just proposing the ability to review a yellow card with a mind to maybe turning it into a red card while the player is in the bin, that there can be
or perhaps overruling the sin binning. I don't know if that's on the cards.
I don't think so, but it's kind of okay, fine. I mean, if it speeds up the game, fine. If they have to call it to a halt to re-review it, like the only way that's going to work is if the TMO has license to overrule the ref's decision in that context,
which is not a bridge we've crossed yet, and that's probably rightly so. I like the referee's decision. I like there at least being in that collection of heads, there at least being someone with final say. Even though in some little combinations of officials that's not always the case, and you see some very passive refs not using the technology correctly at all.
So what are you seeing here?
What do you see? Yeah, that kind of really doubtful, non-decisive stuff coming from the ref, and then the ref sometimes just being guided. Like occasionally, it's the right decision that the video ref is pointing out to the ref as the ref is saying some absolute gibberish that he's like trying to coerce him into making the right call instead of this ridiculous one he just proposed. As funny as that sometimes is, I would like more competent refs with a bit more of an instinct to just use the technology and just get it sorted quickly.
That's the point, like, is that when the ref has the sort of absolute say, it can become a case of just really taking forever about it. But that said, that's more of a technical thing. There's no real specifics there, so maybe they will, maybe they won't. That's not really as interesting a dynamic as the likes of the 50-22.
The 50-22 is more of a game changer in every sense of the word.
And perhaps a very good one.
I'm certainly not. I'm not decrying it. I'm
loving the evolution of tactical kickers. Developing a left foot and a right foot, and I think this is only going to improve that in terms of catching out the back three.
That whole game. It's like that was something actually in an interview with Joey Carberry where he pointed that out. He was saying how he wants that to be a part of his game now that he switched to 10, because he remembers playing at fullback just a nightmare when an out half or the tactical kicker had 2 feet and was kicking off 2 feet. It just became an impossible task to cover every bit of space in the backfield. And if with this kind of rule change or law change coming in, it adds so much scope for just more skills. And I love things like the spiral kick that we just don't see anymore, that is actually a more accurate precision, like a quicker way to find that or to get to that gap, as opposed to like when you look at the Richie Mo'unga is an excellent kicker of a ball, Lima Sopoaga, who you would constantly criticise as, and you're right, his crossfield kicks are too floated. So you spot the space as he does, and it's like, oh, crossfield kick's on here, it's on, and he drops it on the toe, and it's like, oh yes, what a kick. And it just hangs in the air for around 2 seconds too long, and suddenly it's intercepted and it's going. It's a try the other way. With the ball flight of the spiral kick, it means that it's actually got a dip on it. So it means that if the gap is there and you kick an accurate spiral kick as opposed to an end over an end, it's going to get there quicker and going to bounce forward when it gets there. So it's a good part of the game that we don't really see as much.
It'll be more intelligent, tactical, accurate kicking is going to be incentivized if this law comes through. And kicking, like aimless kicking, can be one of the most tedious things to watch.
Well, the whole kick tennis thing that did happen when the 22 carried back rule came in for the first few seasons of that. That was torture.
It was torture. But great kicking can be a really, really cool element of what the game is, and would be super interesting to see. And then all of a sudden, instead of having 40 phases in the middle of the field followed by a knock on and a scrum, which includes 40 tackles, 40 phases, 40 tackles, all of a sudden it's a kick to the corner and then a line out and then a maul, and then maybe a team turns it over and it's an exit, and all of a sudden we've gone 5 or 6 minutes and there hasn't been a tackle, and all of a sudden that's something that they would like to see, is those dynamics play out. Just other elements to the game rather than just phase play. Thanks for watching the Overlap Rugby podcast. If you want to subscribe, there should be a button up here. Don't forget to give us a like and share with your friends, and please leave comments down below. We love the conversation. Thanks.